children's book Comet in Moominland, Tove Yasin said, "You must go a long journey before you can really find out how wonderful home is." And Memorial Day is the best day to give you a little insight on my moving back to Pennsylvania. And I feel privileged to have done the work that I've been able to do here. And being with y'all has been one of the biggest stages of growth in my life. And for that, I thank you. So Memorial Day has always held a special regard by me and my family. As a lot of you know, I grew up in the Rust Belt, an area that got prosperous after the Civil War by way of steel manufacturing, and that eventually left in the 1970s. And the area has been marred with low economic opportunities for residents since that time. But this is how beautiful it is back where I'm from. So I'm going to reference a lot of these places. So way over there is our courthouse and our town square, and this is like what it looks like from the actual mountains. And we've been a place since like the mid to late 1700s, incorporated. And my family has been living there, mostly farming for many generations. I can trace my Mimi's lineage from canal diggers for Andrew Carnegie, abolitionists giving safe haven on the Underground Railroad, and Union soldiers who fought in the Civil War, leaving their small farmland, some still in the family, to fight, and some die for a greater cause. Our hometown square memorializes that many of our ancestors were the first to volunteer for duty when Abraham Lincoln made his call. Historically, county residents were great supporters of the Underground Railroad and abolitionist movements. The story of Charles Bell, an enslaved man, was published by local Quakers in the 1830s, and Richard Barnes, this is a great story, was liberated from slave patrol by by our local sheriff and other locals. It's really good. Both accounts are well documented by local historians. The greatest story is never told, though. Currently in that same town, Walnut Street is lined with stars and bars, which is not part of our heritage. Wonderful, rich history, targeted by a lost cause doctrine and prime for the picking due to fear, scarcity, broken promises, an unfortunate sign that our history is not being honored. For me personally, in that area, when I was growing up, band was my biggest concentration in high school. So lots of practices, concerts, as in the drum line, brass quartet, jazz band, marching band, football games that we had to play at, even though my school hadn't won a game since, and this is true, 1964. And closed down shortly after I left. One parade in particular, though, always stood out. Many of us students were bused into a county school in this town from all over the valley and lower Appalachian towns. And the Memorial Day parade, though never took place here, where we have tons of history, instead we had to be bused over to another town that was closer to my family's ancestral farm. So we marched around a small town with a population of about 400 people, and we ended in the local cemetery. My friends would head off to the tree break to play taps. How though, I stood there feeling so other. I felt very little standing close to my own ancestors' graves, about their great sacrifice, knew very little of their stories, and had very little connection to anything that they had done. I looked through photos with my Mimi. Each and every great American War family members that were in my lineage, they were all represented. In her Remembering Traumatized Families on Memorial Day blog post, Kimberly Key, a therapist, states, "When left unprocessed, which was common for centuries and still is, especially among military personnel, grief and trauma can come out as abuse, detachment, emotionally shutting down, unconscious fear, and escapism through substances, workaholism, excess screen time, etc. end quote. This bleak truth will also played out in my region. So in the late 1990s, some 20 years after the economic fallout of how many of our grandfathers made a living in the region, steel, we were featured on MSNBC as the heroin capital of the East Coast, a county of less than 40,000 people. My family was deeply affected by this shift in the community. Some of my cousins were actually featured on that documentary. I don't know this to be factually true, but I do know deep in my soul that the silence about our traumas caused this deep-seated generational pain and trauma. The only message that many of my teachers could really offer many of us, including me, was to get out. And that message seemed to make the most sense. And I did. But now, nearly 18 years later, as long as the time that I spent there growing up, I feel a strong calling back to those Appalachian hills. The sound of rivers running, train whistles howling, and the chants of generational healing. Where once there was silence killing us, our stories uplifted will honor the greatest stories not told, honoring who they were, we are, and who we will become.
Beloveds, I want to start with thanking Courtney for her powerful reflection and really personalizing the greatest stories never told that I will be talking about through the rest of my talk. And as was named by both in our joys and sorrows and in our reflection today, I also want to start off with Happy Memorial Day. And I'm going to name that that's actually an unusual greeting for me. I have invited people to have a significant Memorial Day for years. This is a weekend that's the official start of summer, pools open, barbecues, and more. And I love summer. And this day is far more than a reason for a sale or to go shopping. As we
I
will.
know there's a problem, folks. Sorry.
Uh-oh. Can we hear me?
No, we can't. Sorry. Try again, Catherine.
I'd like to start with thanking Courtney for her powerful reflection.